So if a new student walks in here, what do you want to learn about? How do you want to learn about it? And then allowing them to find their way through that. Oftentimes, they're just so happy. Like, you mean I get to learn about what I want to learn about and how I want to learn about it and demonstrate the talents that I have? Yeah, you do.
This is the Education Crisis, what it is and how to fix it. I'm your host, Tembi Duncan. This series features renowned education expert Dr. Charles Reigeluth, author of the book Vision and Action, Reinventing Schools Through Personalized, Competency-Based Education. Together, we examine the crisis in American education. What has caused the crisis? What our schools need to be like to fix the crisis? How to successfully transform to that very different kind of school, and what you can do to help your schools to transform. Chapter 5. Is the current curriculum irrelevant? Dr. Reigeluth, in chapters 2 and 3 of this series, you discussed student progress based on learning instead of time. You said that this continuous progress approach to learning helps learners who need more time because they don't accumulate gaps that make future learning more difficult. And you said it also helps faster learners because they don't have to wait for the class to move on. Then you talked about all the features of a school system that have to change in order for learning-based student progress to work well. That includes personalized learning, project-based learning with just-in-time tutorials, team-based learning, and self-directed learning. Then in chapter 4, you talked about how roles need to change to make this work, with the teacher becoming a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage, with the student becoming active and self-directed rather than passive, and with the parents and community playing a more active role. And even with technology becoming much more of a tool for the student rather than for the teacher, and serving the functions of planning, instructing, assessing, and even record keeping for student learning. Now, that gives us a pretty comprehensive picture of how schools need to change to better serve the needs of students, families, and communities in this post-industrial digital age. But you haven't said anything yet about changes that are needed in what schools teach. Would you address this issue now?
I'd be delighted. To figure out how the curriculum should change, we need to look at how our world has changed. It doesn't matter how well we teach if we're teaching the wrong things. And what students need to learn has been changing dramatically as we evolve deeper into the digital age. So what curriculum will best meet students' needs will continue to change over time. And it also is different from one community to another. Each community must decide to some extent what is most important to teach their children. We suggest that what's most important is to teach things that are relevant to students' current and future lives, including personal and cultural relevance. In other words, what they need to learn to become happy, healthy, caring, successful adults who contribute to their communities in an increasingly complex and unpredictable high-tech future. So our listeners should focus on what might be relevant in their community. While some of the traditional basics are no longer so important, many still are, such as the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. However, tools like calculators and artificial intelligence change to some extent the nature of what students need to learn regarding arithmetic and writing. More emphasis needs to be placed on higher-level thinking in those domains, and in fact in all domains.
A different curriculum that's relevant to the world we live in today. That makes sense. What other changes are important to make to the curriculum?
Well, there are also some new basics, besides higher-level thinking. Education leaders have identified a few things worth mentioning. Tony Wagner has identified critical thinking and problem-solving, collaboration and leading by influence, agility and adaptability, initiative and entrepreneurialism, effective oral and written communication, accessing and analyzing information, and curiosity and imagination as most important for meeting students' and society's needs in the digital age. Similarly, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation identified mastering rigorous academic content, learning how to think critically and solve problems, working collaboratively, communicating effectively, directing one's own learning, and developing a growth mindset, which means a belief in one's ability to grow, as most important. Alan Collins proposed a passion-based curriculum derived largely from elements at Central Park East Secondary School, high-tech schools, Summit Public Schools, and alt schools. It entails truly deep learning on a small number of complex topics about which the student is passionate. These topics include truly useful elements of the current curriculum in projects the student works on for each topic, along with new elements like finance, health, economics, the environment, law, strategic thinking, creative thinking, social and emotional learning, and much more. The nonprofit organization Next Generation Learning Challenges integrated much of the earlier work on curriculum for the new paradigm into the My Ways framework, which includes 20 competencies grouped into 4 categories: content knowledge, habits of success, creative know-how, and wayfinding abilities. They propose this curriculum to all the schools that they've helped to transform to the new paradigm. And perhaps, in my view, the most interesting to me is Mark Prensky's recommendation that the curriculum goes beyond improving students to improving their world, with students improving during that process. Consequently, he proposes a change in how the curriculum is organized. Currently, it is organized around the 4 pillars of math, English, social studies, and science, whose initials, he points out, spell mess. He proposes that it be organized around 4 different pillars: effective accomplishing, effective thinking, effective action, and effective relationships. I really like the focus of student projects being to improve the student's world as well as to advance their own learning.
Me too. So it sounds like these new basics are grounded in research that provides several curricular options for reshaping what schools teach as they focus on relevance to students' lives in this new digital age paradigm.
Yes,
Are there other considerations besides greater relevance to students' lives?
indeed. In the real world, our lives are not divided into the traditional subjects: science, history, English, geography, music, and so forth. The real world is interdisciplinary, and all subjects are interrelated. Students need to learn how they are interrelated, how to draw on multiple subjects to solve problems. So instead of organizing the curriculum into subjects, schools should organize it into interdisciplinary projects, which are then the vehicles for learning relevant parts of the subjects. And this fits well with project-based learning that we talked about in Chapter 3, as well as the recommendation for projects that improve the student's world. Another theme is whole child education. There is strong evidence that students benefit greatly from education that addresses all aspects of human development: social, emotional, physical, psychological, ethical, identity, and cultural, as well as cognitive. Daniel Goleman has presented convincing evidence that emotional intelligence is more important than intellectual intelligence for a person's success in work life and personal life. Childhood obesity is a problem in the U.S., and education could help solve this problem through health education and physical activity or education. Sports for everyone, not just the physical elite. I went to a school where all students were required to do a sport every day, and this was good for mental health and social emotional development as well as physical health. Schools like the Milton Hershey School show that it's possible to provide whole child education with current school resources.
So, whole child education improves each student's success in life as well as their physical and mental health. Anything else?
Yes, another theme is cultivating individual strengths and talents. While there is some universal content that all students should learn, it's also important to allow students to spend some time pursuing their individual interests, strengths, and talents. This doesn't just enhance student motivation, it also helps students to become more successful in life. And since there are so many more different careers in the digital age, such diversity of interests and talents is important to the health of our communities, economy, and society. So we need a balance of common core and individual strengths and interests.
So, interdisciplinary projects, whole child education, and cultivating individual strengths and talents. Anything else about curriculum for the digital age?
Well, something that's not new but is important is designing sound progressions in what is taught. First, the content needs to be appropriate for the student's stage of human development. Second, there are some things that have to be learned before other things can be learned, called learning prerequisites. Third, there are other things that just make it easier to learn something else. But with the focus on student projects, it is projects that need to be selected in a way that takes such learning progressions into account for each student. Technology can make this selection of projects an easy process based on the student's learning goals. In fact, each student should be encouraged to think from an early age about what they want to do when they grow up. Having long-term goals motivates them to pursue short-term learning goals that will help them get there.
So to summarize, the curriculum needs to focus more on content that's relevant to students' lives in the digital age. So I've heard you mention critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, initiative, and entrepreneurialism. You mentioned effective oral and written communication, accessing and analyzing information, directing one's own learning, and curiosity and creative thinking.
Yes, and it's important that the curriculum be passion-based and addresses such subjects as finance, health, economics, the environment, law, strategic thinking, and systemic thinking, among others.
Oh, and the curriculum should be interdisciplinary. It should address all aspects of child development, the whole child, and it should cultivate individual strengths of each student. But what really left an impression on me is the idea that the curriculum should go beyond improving individuals. It should use projects in which learners improve their world and improve themselves at the same time.
Yeah, the urgency for that improve the world mentality is more important now than it's ever been. With the divisiveness and polarization we see in the U.S. today, changes in education may be the best way to deal with this devastating problem.
It's important to know that some of these changes in curriculum have already been made in schools across the country. Here's Nick Ryan and Jim Wortman from the Minnesota New Country School. Nick, would you say that students at your school are learning something different than students at a traditional school?
Yes, and that we don't have a super content focused curriculum here. I mean, we are definitely working with students to learn the self-management skills, the organizational skills, the self-advocacy skills that apply more broadly. And then they show up and they do quite well in like post-secondary opportunities. They learn how to learn things. They maybe didn't quite spend as much time on a specific content area, but by the time they get to college, they're pretty confident that give me something and I need to get it done, I can get it done.
Our goal is to find out what they're curious about. Why do they want to learn more about those topics? And then how do we facilitate that? And then how do they then bring that knowledge back to us to be assessed through their project? So we're really about striking when the interest is there. So, I really want to learn more about what's happening with this topic right now, or why is this important? Like Nick said, the goal is that they learn how to learn. They learn what their learning inventory, their learning style is, and then what are their strengths and what are areas that they need to get better in. And so that's really what we're up to, is teaching them that self-awareness. Students have to learn to be self-confident, and they have to learn how to access information and synthesize that. That takes some time, but our students are doing it. And as Nick said, they're doing fine at college. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Okay, so there's been a focus on agency and self-actualization. Are there other aspects of whole child education that are important to you?
Physical and mental health. There's a lot of focus on that in our program too. When a student is demonstrating that they're not using agency well, that they're not showing motivation, maybe they're hesitant to try something on their own, we want to know what's going on with them, and then teaching them self-care strategies, teaching them the importance of physical activity, taking care of themselves mentally, mindfulness. We're huge proponents of Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. And if we're seeing a child is not successful, we're probably looking at the bottom layer of Maslow and saying, what's missing here? How do we create connections for this child? Why is this child withdrawn? And trying to provide avenues towards a healthier individual.
I see. And what about interpersonal skills?
Our school is a very social place. And so part of that's what they love here is it's a opportunity to spend a lot of time amongst different aged peers and interacting with them, helping them to sort out how to manage, how to communicate respectfully and effectively with other people, how to work as a team. We don't see a ton of, it's kind of something we're thinking about. We don't see a ton of like group projects. And I think we're sort of reconsidering whether we should be implementing more of those or allowing more of them to give students that opportunity to work together towards a goal and see how it goes.
Interesting. So, how much freedom do students have to follow their own interests versus sticking to a set curriculum?
100%. All of it. We try to implement agency right off the bat. So if a new student walks in here, what do you want to learn about? How do you want to learn about it? And then allowing them to find their way through that. Oftentimes, that's our opportunity to assess what amount of independence do they show. Sometimes it just blows me away that a student picks up this curriculum right away and they're just so happy. Like, you mean I get to learn about what I want to learn about and how I want to learn about it and demonstrate the talents that I have? Yeah, you do. And you see them just go with it. Other times you see students struggle with that and self-confidence in showing their work. And so they get agency right off the bat.
So it sounds like at Minnesota New Country School, teachers are guiding students to build confidence in how they learn and how they manage themselves through a process of tapping into their own interests and talents. But there's also a focus on the students' well-being and their development of healthy connections with their peers through meaningful communication and collaboration. Now, let's hear from Orly Friedman at the Redbridge School in San Francisco, California. Orly, can you walk me through your curriculum?
Yes. So at Redbridge, we have 4 core subjects, which are communication, computation, observation, and critical thinking and world studies. And the reason that we've chosen those 4 are because we think that no matter what students want to do later in life, those are 4 things that they need to be good at regardless of profession. So no matter what you do later in life, you have to be a good communicator. That could be communicating in writing and oral communication skills. Also, you need to be able to describe the world through numbers at some point, whether that is budgeting or statistics or whatnot. So that's another piece of it. Observation is a subject that I think might be unique to Redbridge. It's teaching kids how to look carefully at the world around them. Also, no matter what you do in life, you need to be able to look carefully around you and make sense of what you see and know how and what to look for. And then our 4th subject is critical thinking and world studies, which is learning about the world around us, but with an emphasis on question asking and thinking through things like your perspective and what if it were different and these other big picture questions. This is really also derived from Deborah Meyer's work. So those are our 4 core subjects. And then in addition to that, we also teach work habits and character habits. Work habits are executive function skills like managing your time, staying focused, taking initiative. And then character habits is our social emotional learning curriculum, which is, covers things like interpersonal dynamics and kindness, gratitude, that sort of work.
So, in addition to those core subjects and habits, how much space do you give students to follow their own interests?
So, students have time in the day when they're making decisions about what they're working on. As they progress through the autonomy level systems at Redbridge, each autonomy level increases in the amount of time and freedom students have to make choices about their learning. So in autonomy level 1, students can make decisions about what they're working on in the afternoon in a block we call deliberate practice, but their choices are curated by the teachers. By the time students get to autonomy level 3, that's when they are able to have time in the day for a personal goal. So their personal goal can really be anything. We've had students whose personal goal has been to learn how to knit or to build a robotic arm or recently to create a website about art. We've also had students whose personal goals were creating bath bombs. So we really don't put limits on what students' personal goals are, but we want to support students in being able to make a longer term plan, think through what resources they need, and stick with something over time. So the important learning there is really the process rather than exactly what the end output is. And then as students move into autonomy level 4 and 5, they have time also to start working on personal academic goals as well.
Students at the Redbridge School do have core subjects to learn, but through practicing work habits and character habits, they develop the ability to shape their own learning journeys. Education is not one size fits all. Before we end this chapter, listen closely for a special offer. Listeners of this podcast receive 20% off Dr. Reigeluth's book, Vision and Action, with the exclusive code VA20 when you order directly from solutiontree.com. This offer is only available for a limited time. Visit solutiontree.com to order your copy today. We are deeply grateful to everyone who supported our GoFundMe campaign, including Roberto Joseph, Fred O'Neill, Sinem Aslan, Nari Kim, and Rob Fauché. The campaign is called Help End America's Education Crisis Now, and the link's in the show notes. Donate today to help us keep this podcast available to all. Thanks so much to Dr. Reigeluth, author of Vision in Action, and our guests, Jim Wortman and Nick Ryan from the Minnesota New Country School, as well as Orly Friedman from the Redbridge School. That's it for Chapter 5 of the Education Crisis, What It Is and How to Fix It. I'm Tembi Duncan, and remember, the future of education is in our hands.